Hey everyone, Yasin here, and this video is about the creative use of reference. And by that I mean just using reference as a jumping off point and not being super faithful to what you see necessarily, or else when doing studies, not copying the reference exactly. So the idea is to use a reference however much or little as you want. And for the first one, I'm going to do 2 drawings. And for this one, I'm sort of staying, pretty faithful to the reference, except I caricatured the guy, because the way I see this guy, I see like a big triangle, which you can see, like his whole forehead and nose, and then his chin to the nose. It feels like there's like a triangle there. And with the woman, she's just more flat to me. I mean, there's still that triangle, but it's a lot more diminished. And so I figured, okay, let's exaggerate the guy. And I don't know, I do worse when I exaggerate women. Because I don't know, it's harder for me to, because everything's smaller, right? So if someone has a small nose and you want to exaggerate it, you make it even smaller. But that tends to just start to look, sometimes it just looks like anime. But anyway, okay, so why do I promote this way of drawing and not staying absolutely faithful to the photo reference? Well, I used to do a lot of drawings where it was just copying a photo, and I thought that was helpful. And I suppose in some ways it is, but ever since I created my style, and I've had it for a while now, so I'm pretty used to it, and it's hard to actually get out of it. But because of that, when I draw, I committed to myself that I would only draw in my style, maybe less or more my style, but still in my style. And so I haven't been able to just copy a photo exactly the way I see it. And I found that actually I was learning a lot more by not doing this. And what happens is, at least for me, when I'm trying to copy a photo, I start to measure the angles, and it becomes this act of pure replication, and I'm almost not even paying attention to what I'm drawing as much as it is just looking for negative shapes and looking for certain angles and certain measurements and things like that. So with this method, what it is just, you can exaggerate, you can change the person. It's not like it has to actually be the person you're drawing, but it's using the reference only as a guide. And sometimes I go completely far away from the reference, but it's more trying to figure out things. And often what I'll do with reference nowadays is, if I draw something from reference, I'll try and draw something right away after from imagination. And try to keep whatever it was that I felt I learned in the reference. So for instance, in this image, I felt something that was something I wouldn't have thought of immediately would be an area behind the guy's neck. You see there's like this crease that outlines the trapezius. I wouldn't have really thought of that. So it's like, okay, so that's something to keep in mind. The other thing is, I think it just makes the whole using referencing a lot more fun, especially when you're learning, because it's not like, well, okay, you just have to do this blind copy. It feels too academic that way. This way it feels more freeing, and plus you learn more. And this is something that took me a while to get my head around, was there's that phrase, no pain, no gain. But really, the times I've learned the most in art have been times where it's just been fun. It's not been this painful act of, oh, I have to copy this and this is going to make me better, and so I've got to nail everything and make it accurate. It's been much more about, no, I'm really enjoying this, and this comes through the work. And I also used to think that there was this big separation between, well, sure, you practice and that's not fun at all, and then you do your work and that's fun. But I found that too doesn't seem to be the case. There are ways of just making the practice much more enjoyable, and that helps a lot because you get better at whatever you do. So if you get better at drawing things that please you or things that you like, or if you do those a lot, then you'll get better at it. And if what you do is sort of torture yourself a lot, then you get better at that too. And by torture, I mean maybe drawing things you don't like, or drawing things you're not very interested in just because you feel like, well, I have to be doing this. So in this image, I decided to change it quite a bit more than the last one. And I guess I can walk you through my decision-making process. So first of all, I felt like the image in the reference is a bit, I don't know, it doesn't feel aggressive enough. It feels a bit staged, rather. Like, yes, they were posing for a picture. And so I wanted to add a bit more aggression, and I wanted to change the character while maintaining some things. Like, okay, so the guy's got this pretty big nose. They both have very interesting nose shapes. But I wanted to play around with those. And then the other thing is, the guy who's the aggressor is leaning forward, so I wanted to emphasize that. And the way I do that is by increasing, I guess it's a line of action, but just there's this forward momentum, there's this feeling of being hunched over and the weight moving forward. So I created a bigger top heavy part to make that feel more like I don't know, I guess I think of things like buffaloes or bison or something, like they're very top heavy and then they're weaker in the back, but that amount of heaviness towards the front makes it feel very powerful and like it's coming towards you. And then for the guy, it was very important for me to contrast that with a very lean and opposite line of action, so it almost looks like one force is going into the other force and pressing against it. I don't know if that makes sense, but I hope it does. Actually, even in the reference, you can see that. You can see how the guy who, I guess he's being bullied, but his body is sort of, in a way, fitting into the other guy's body. Does that... what? I don't know how to say this properly, but there's like a relationship between these two. And so what I go for now, much more than just what is the reference showing me, is what story am I trying to tell and how can I make that more clear? So, for instance, making the guy move back is a way of showing like he's weak, he's getting manhandled, right? And so that's really important to maybe invent or exaggerate. But then I thought there's also things that I wouldn't have thought of right away. Like maybe the way he's holding his hand, that's not something I think of. And now I was trying to draw the legs of the guy and make them the way they are in the reference, more or less, but in the style. But I felt it wasn't strong enough. It just didn't feel like it fit the character in terms of his amount of exaggeration. And so what I did is I gave him a much wider stance, and I actually had him invading the space of the other guy, because that's what it feels like to me. It's an intrusion. It's one guy who's really invading the personal space of another guy, and from the expression of his face, you can sort of get that feeling, or at least that's the way I see the things. Other things that I find are important or useful with reference are things like folds, noticing where folds go, looking for very interesting shapes that you wouldn't think of. But yeah, that's kind of the point is, and here I'm just using a white border to clarify my positive and negative shapes, because this is also important to get a sense of what do your big shapes look like. Like, think about the frame as well as just the guys occupying the frame. You want that to be interesting. So yeah, the proportions and things, any unique feature is what I really pay attention to, rather than just, oh, I have to make this exactly like the reference. Because this way, when I'm manipulating it and changing it, I have to ask myself questions like, okay, since I've changed the jacket on the bullied kid, for instance, it's leather, so I have to think, like, what makes this look like leather? What are the properties of leather? Whereas if I was just copying it, instead of thinking about that, I might just be thinking, oh, okay, so there's a fold here, and I just draw that fold, and then there's this here, and then draw that. So yeah, now what I'm doing is adding some occlusion shadows, which are the dark areas that don't catch light. And I've talked about this before in videos, and I think it really helps make things pop, and it helps to convey things overlapping, because one form is going in front of another form. So I think that's really important to get across. And I added things like, I added veins in the dude's neck. There aren't those veins in the reference that I can see. But again, it's just trying to do whatever you can to enhance the story the way you see it. And I think the more personal you make every image you do, even the ones for practice, the better they are, the more you'll learn from it, and the more you can actually apply that right away. And so much, I think, I've gotten from simply drawing from imagination a lot. So it's, as I get older, I'm seeing more and more that imagination is really, or it's been the most helpful thing, and it's the thing that helps me grow the most, is not necessarily using reference a lot. And this kind of goes against a lot of what I hear people talk about, because they're always, a lot of professionals anyway, will keep talking about how, use reference. But I think it's important to use reference to advise you about things you may not know. But as much as you can, try and create things from your imagination. And then when you get stuck, that's where reference really comes in handy. Or when you want to clarify things, when you're not sure, what are the details about this? How does this really work? That's when reference becomes essential. And here I just, decided to add some color on top because, I don't know, felt maybe it was a good idea. So I hope you try using reference more creatively, and thanks for watching.